Have you ever wondered what really happened during the Tulsa Race Massacre? Or why the Australian Army once went to war against emus? Prepare to have your mind blown as we uncover 10 shocking historical events that you definitely didn't learn about in school. From the Mau Massacre that killed millions in China, to the Wall Street bombing that predated 9/11s, these stories have been buried, forgotten, or covered up. But now, it's time to shed light on the dark underbelly of history. You may think you know the past, but trust me, you have no idea. These events will make you question everything you thought you knew. And by the end of this video, you'll never look at history the same way again. So if you're ready to have your perspective shifted and your curiosity piqued, buckle up. This is going to be a wild ride through some of the most surprising, bizarre, and downright shocking moments in history. The Mau Massacre, 1966 to 1976. In the midst of China's Cultural Revolution, Mao Zedong unleashed a reign of terror that left millions dead. Neighbors turned on neighbors, intellectuals were persecuted, and the country descended into chaos. Mao's goal was to preserve Chinese communism by purging remnants of capitalist and traditional elements from society. The mass upheaval began in Beijing with Red August in 1966, as young people, mainly students, formed Red Guard cadres throughout the country. Emboldened radicals seized power from local governments, establishing new revolutionary committees. After the fall of Lin Biao in 1971, the Gang of Four became influential until Mao's death in 1976. While the Cultural Revolution failed to achieve its main objectives, it marked Mao's return to power and had a lasting impact on China. The Wall Street Attack, 1920. On a sunny September day in 1920, a horse-drawn wagon exploded on Wall Street, killing 38 people and injuring hundreds more. It was the deadliest terror attack on U.S. soil until 9/11s. The blast caused over $2 million in property damage and destroyed most of the interior spaces of the J.P. Morgan and Company Bank building. Investigators believe the bombing was carried out by Galleonists, a group responsible for a series of bombings the previous year. The perpetrators were never caught, and the story faded from public memory. Rescue efforts were heroic, with a 17-year-old messenger commandeering a car to transport 30 injured people to the hospital. Coming up next, you thought the Wall Street attack was shocking? Just wait until you hear about the systematic genocide of the Armenian people and the forced relocation of Native Americans on the Trail of Tears. 2 dark chapters in history that will leave you outraged and saddened. Before we dive into it, please subscribe and like this video. The Armenian Genocide, 1915 to 1916. In the midst of World War I, the Ottoman Empire systematically murdered over 1 million Armenians. It was a horrific act of ethnic cleansing, yet to this day the Turkish government denies it ever happened. At the orders of Talat Pasha, an estimated 800,000 to 1.2 million Armenians were sent on death marches to the Syrian desert in 1915 and 1916. Driven forward by paramilitary escorts, the deportees were deprived of food and water and subjected to robbery, rape, and massacres. Around 100,000 to 200,000 Armenian women and children were forcibly converted to Islam and integrated into Muslim households. Together with the mass murder and expulsion of Assyrian/Syriac and Greek Orthodox Christians, it enabled the creation of an ethno-nationalist Turkish state. The Trail of Tears, 1830 to 1840. In the 1830s, the U.S. government forcibly relocated tens of thousands of Native Americans from their ancestral lands. Thousands died from disease, starvation, and exposure on the brutal journey. As part of Indian removal, members of the Cherokee, Muskogee, Seminole, Chickasaw, and Choctaw nations were forced to relocate to newly designated Indian Territory west of the Mississippi River. After the passage of the Indian Removal Act in 1830, the Cherokee removal in 1838 was the last forced removal east of the Mississippi, brought on by the discovery of gold near Dahlonega, Georgia, in 1828. Thousands died before reaching their destinations, or shortly after. The Tulsa Race Massacre, 1921. In 1921, a thriving African-American community in Tulsa, Oklahoma, known as Black Wall Street, was burned to the ground by a white mob. More than 800 people were admitted to hospitals, and as many as 6,000 black residents of Tulsa were interned in large facilities, many of them for several days. The Oklahoma Bureau of Vital Statistics officially recorded 36 dead, but the 2001 Tulsa Reparations Coalition examination of events identified 39 dead, 26 black and 13 white. The massacre began after 19-year-old Dick Rowland, a black shoe shiner, was accused of assaulting Sarah Page, a white 17-year-old elevator operator. Rumors that Rowland was to be lynched spread throughout the city, sparking the violence. Bacon's Rebellion, 1676. In 1676, a group of Virginia colonists led by Nathaniel Bacon rose up against the British colonial government. They burned Jamestown to the ground, marking the first time an American colony had revolted against the crown. Bacon's Rebellion was a product of tensions between European colonists and Native Americans, as well as economic and social inequalities among the colonists themselves. While it failed, the uprising foreshadowed the American Revolution to come and highlighted the growing discontent in the colonies. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster, 1986. On April 26, 1986, a reactor at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine exploded, releasing massive amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere. It was the worst nuclear disaster in history, yet the Soviet government initially covered up the extent of the catastrophe. The explosion occurred during a safety test when the reactor's emergency safety systems were deliberately turned off. The resulting fire and steam explosion destroyed the reactor and released large quantities of radioactive particles into the atmosphere. 31 plant workers and firefighters died in the initial explosion and fire, and dozens more succumbed to radiation sickness in the following months. The Stonewall Uprising, 1969. In June 1969, police raided the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in New York City. But this time, the patrons fought back, sparking 3 days of riots and protests. It was a watershed moment in the modern LGBTQ+ rights movement. The Stonewall riots were a series of spontaneous, violent demonstrations by members of the LGBTQ+ community in response to a police raid on the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village, Manhattan. They are widely considered to constitute the most important event leading to the gay liberation movement and the modern fight for LGBTQ+ rights in the United States. The murder of Fred Hampton, 1969. In December 1969, Fred Hampton, a young Black Panther leader, was killed in a police raid on his apartment. It was later revealed that the FBI had targeted Hampton and infiltrated the Black Panthers, using informants to orchestrate his assassination. Hampton was drugged by an FBI informant the night of the raid, and police fired over 90 shots into the apartment, killing Hampton and Mark Clark. The event exemplifies the government's suppression of civil rights activists and the ongoing fight for racial justice. The Great Emu War, 1932. In 1932, the Australian military launched a campaign to cull the emu population in Western Australia. But the emus proved to be a formidable foe, with the soldiers' bullets bouncing off their thick feathers. The war was a humiliating defeat for the military, and the emus emerged victorious. The emus' resilience and the military's failure in this bizarre conflict serve as a reminder that sometimes nature can't be tamed. As we've seen, history is often more complex, disturbing, and just plain weird than what's presented in textbooks. The powers that be don't always want us to know the full truth. But by shining a light on these forgotten moments, we can gain a deeper, more nuanced understanding of how the world was shaped. So what's the takeaway here? Don't just accept the version of history you're fed. Dig deeper, question the narrative, and be open to the possibility that there's always more to the story. Because when you peel back the layers, you never know what surprising, bizarre, or downright shocking revelations you might uncover. Remember, These events may have been relegated to the dustbin of history, but their impact still resonates today. They serve as powerful reminders of the capacity for both good and evil that lies within the human experience. Now that you've seen the shocking truth, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you share these stories, challenge the status quo, or simply look at the world with a more critical eye? The choice is yours. One thing's for sure, you'll never look at history the same way again. So consider this your wake-up call. The past is full of surprises, and it's time to uncover them, no matter how uncomfortable or unbelievable they may be.